This is the most mind-blowing revelation you'll hear today. Stay with me. We all know that God is just, right? But do you know that He always finds justification for every action that He takes, no matter how little it may seem? Now, over time, I have been puzzled by the question of justification around God's promise to Abraham and the inheritance of the promised land by God's children. Let's read the book of Genesis chapter 15 from verse 4 to 7 together. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but the son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He took him outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them, then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Abraham believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. He also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. Now let's pause there for a second. These were two promises in one. First, God said his descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the sky. And secondly, that his descendants, will take possession of the land that Abraham was presently dwelling in. Let's not forget that Abraham at that time was dwelling near the tree of Mamre of the Amorites. So that wasn't in any way his land, nor his offspring's. But scripture says that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. So God did promise him because he could. However, God still needed to justify why he would be driving out the present occupants from their land to bring in new people, which are his people. And if that's the case, why doesn't he just give it to Abraham now? I mean, why must he give it to his descendants over 500 years into the future? Well, Genesis chapter 15 verse 16 does provide clarity on this. It reads, In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. Wait, what? You're telling me God's divine patience allowed this nation over 500 years to change their ways, but their continued wickedness then justified God's decision to give their lands to the Israelites? But hold on, this still doesn't justify why the children of Israel had to suffer for 400 years in the hands of the Egyptians. When I say this, you're not going to believe me, but it is right there in front of us, plain and simple. So firstly, we must understand that God, in his omniscience, fully aware that they would face enslavement and maltreatment in Egypt, still chose to send them there. Now, this might sound harsh, but there's a profound reason behind it. As documented in the book of Genesis, the same Genesis 15 that we are reading from verse 9 to 11, God instructed Abraham to prepare a covenant offering, which he did meticulously. So the Lord said to him, Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. So Abraham brought all this to him, cut them in two, and arranged the house opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abraham drove them away. Wait a minute. So God had sent birds of prey to devour the offering as a means of accepting. But if you notice, you see that the word but was used there. Abraham drove them away. It wasn't so simple after all. Now, this act signified a human intervention in a divine process. As seemingly insignificant as this was, it was pivotal as justification enough for God to send Abraham's descendants for a period of testing and purification before they could inherit the promised land. Now, remember also in the case of Moses, the reason why he didn't inherit the promised land was simply because he struck the rock when he was actually meant to just touch it. Now, see, these things don't come with instruction manuals, but God still uses them to fulfill his purposes. So lastly, we see the enslavement of the Egyptians and the harsh treatment of the Israelites as recounted in Exodus chapter 1 from verse 8 to 14. This provided a necessary justification for God to execute judgment upon Egypt. So the Egyptians' cruelty was met with the divine retribution that was demonstrating God's justice and his commitment to his covenant with Abraham. So in conclusion, this revelation powerfully illustrates the meticulous planning of a God who is just. Each event, from seemingly trivial to monumental, serves as a purpose in fulfilling his divine promises. Now, as believers, we are reminded of the importance of faith and patience and trusting that God's timing and judgment are always perfect. Until I see you in the next time, great grace.